So welcome. This is so exciting to have you all here so that we can highlight the Northwestern College book. We have a very distinguished group of panelists. Of course, you all know President Christie because he's the president, and who doesn't know the president? Many of the other people on the board you are familiar with because Jill Harsma and Doug Anderson have been members of the board and have contributed a lot to the Dutch American Heritage Museum. Greta, right here, she has given us several titillating I don't know. Presentations. I'm all thrown off now. Bloodthirsty Alice Blood, poor thing. And then we have Kim Vaness and Duane Beeson, who have also been attenders here a lot. So many of these faces you've seen before. So we're going to just start a little bit about how this book came into being, and it was really the brainchild or vision of President Christie. So I was wondering if you could tell us why now? What was the impetus for this?
Thank you. I would say a couple things. First of all, maybe turn the mic on first. That might help. A couple things. I would say I started 18 years ago at Northwestern. When I arrived, or maybe even before, we had a history that had been completed, but it ended in 1982. So Gerald DeYoung had written a nice history from our first 100 years, from 1882 to 1982. And that was helpful to me as a new person, not an alumnus or alum of Northwestern. But it ended about the time we were just starting to come into our own as a four-year college. We were only 20 years young as a four-year college at that point, and didn't cover the Boltman years, the Murphy years, and just all the amazing things I thought had happened since that time, that it just felt to me like a more robust, this is also a different type of history, a lot of facts, a lot of figures, not so much about the actual people and stories and students. And so it just felt like we needed a little more robust history of Northwestern to match the fact that we've become a more robust four-year college.
Yeah, that's great. But you know, as we know around here that we might have big dreams, but big dreams need benefactors. So I thought maybe you could acknowledge the people that helped make this all possible as well.
Yes, and I should have started by also saying before even approaching benefactors, we had to have someone who actually would be willing to write this history. So I approached, Doug had Professor Anderson had just retired in 2014, and in 2017, I approached him and said, my alma mater had actually an emeritus history professor who wrote the history of my alma mater, and I thought, who better to do this than a trained historian, and had much admiration for Doug. So I asked him if he'd be willing, and in a moment of weakness, he said yes. And that was 2017. But then, of course, the next question that my trusty assistant Jill asked was, well, how are we going to pay for this? I said, hadn't thought about that. So I actually approached Dr. Tom Truesdale's father, Paul, who has a love of history, and asked if he'd be willing to just help us with some startup funds. Rebecca and others actually did oral histories. We went out they went out and actually visited with a number of the folks who were interviewed for the book, and everything from Doug's time, Kim's time, other people's time, right down to the publishing of this book is all thanks to the Truesdales. So my heartfelt thanks to Paul and Barb and Tom and your family. It literally would not have been possible without the generosity of the Truesdale, so I want to make a special thank you to them.
Well, now we'll get to the trusty historian, the one who put how many years? 7 some years in there. And Doug, many of us here, I think it's safe to say, have not written a history book, nor a comprehensive history book. In your preface, you talk about try not to be disappointed, though, if something doesn't get the attention you were expecting. How in the world, Doug, did you kind of figure out what to put in the book when there was 142 years of material?
It took time. Yeah, this is only comprehensive in the sense of covering years, but in terms of what could be covered, choices had to be made. And it was not always easy to decide, but based on the sources, what things came up, what were mentioned, what could be substantiated, those sorts of things went into figuring out, well, I guess one way I think about this, it's kind of like a jigsaw puzzle, except I know that I don't have all the pieces, but what pieces do I have, and what ones seem to fit together given the pieces that I have?
So you were talking about sources. A historian uses a lot of primary sources. So what sources did you consult in order to write this, what I would say comprehensive chronologically history book?
Well, certainly the Classic and the Beacon. The Classic, as some of you may know, started as the student magazine, literary magazine in the academy days, but then it turned into more administration, public relations, alumni functions. But then the Beacon didn't start until junior college, but reading through that, so page after page, notes for all of these, presidential material, board material, faculty material, and depending upon what things arose, then maybe leading to taking a look at other things as well.
Okay, I just finished the book last weekend, and what I really liked about the book is sometimes it's all top down. It's all about the people in charge of institution or government positions. But what this did so nicely is bring in that, but also the students' voices, and so it made it for a really interesting read. Now, when you're doing chronological material, you came up with very clever titles, and each chapter had a theme. How did you go about creating those titles and those themes for each chapter based on a certain time frame?
I tend to look for a quote that gets at something that would tie a number of things together. So a particular quote, and I think most of the chapters have quotations that are the title, although not all of them. The prologue doesn't really, but anyway. And then going back and reflecting on, before writing each chapter, going over the notes I have and trying to see what emerges. So thinking and praying and what things fit together. So just kind of a process that I don't know I could say anything more specific about how to do it than that.
Well, it's a process that requires a ton of notes and a ton of thinking. I think a lot of people don't realize that doing good history, you have to really think and ponder and try to synthesize.
I can't make it up. That's not allowed in history.
Exactly.
So I have to. So what pieces of the puzzle do I have? What's there, and then what sense to make of it? What things does it point to?
Well, at this time, would you care to read a few pages just to show the title and how he incorporates quotes, and then how he kind of weaves in different personalities that stand out at Northwestern College?
Okay, this is from the beginning of chapter 3, which is on the junior college, titled Providence Has Been Good, 1928 to 1960. Quotation. Our residence on this campus was a long and enjoyable one. The Lord sometimes called us to go through times of testing, difficulties, discouragement, and sickness of both ourselves and the family. We were compelled to see 3 of our sons go off to war. But God's providence has been good. Our lives have ever been spared, and we have experienced divine blessing in manifold ways. End quote. Jacob Heemstra spoke these words in the summer of 1951 to Northwestern's executive committee. The words reflected Reformed piety and restrained eloquence, both of which were second nature to him. Before becoming president of Northwestern Junior College and Academy, NWJC, in 1928, Heemstra had been both a pastor and a college professor. In acknowledging God's good providence for him and his family, he was also implying gratitude to God's blessing on Northwestern. At age 63, Heemstra was retiring from the presidency of NWJC. He was recovering from a heart attack earlier in 1951, following the college's unsuccessful attempt at accreditation from the North Central Association. Another NWJC stalwart, instructor Fern Smith, had been on campus almost as long as Heemstra. 10 years younger than him, she did not retire until 1961. Miss Smith and Dr. Heemstra were something of a dynamic duo around whom NWJC grew and flourished between 1928 and 1951. An undated photograph in the book shows them in the context in which many saw them, with the bus that carried them and the Northwestern Choir to Reformed churches throughout the upper Midwest. These tours were Heemstra's idea. At their stops, Heemstra gave the introductions, Smith directed the performances, and then Heemstra briefly preached. Heemstra and Smith were first met each other at Central College in Pella, Iowa, when Heemstra joined the faculty there in 1918, a year before Smith graduated as a promising keyboard performer and teacher. Heemstra persuaded Smith to join the faculty of NWJC in 1928, not only because he already knew her, but also because by then she resided in Orange City, living with her sister and brother-in-law, Leona and Ari Vanderstoep. Smith and Heemstra were a study in contrasts. She was tiny, 4 feet 11, compared to Heemstra and most everyone else. She did not have a graduate degree, whereas he did. She was publicly reticent, even self-effacing. He was comparatively outgoing. She was neither of Dutch descent nor Reformed by upbringing, while he was both. Yet, they had some things in common. For one, they were both from the rural, small-town, agricultural Midwest. Heemstra began life on a farm 3 miles north of Orange City. Smith was a native of the Sand Hills of Nebraska, living in Kansas and then the Grand Junction area of western Colorado after the death of her father when she was only 3. Finally, they each were disciplined, frugal, no-nonsense personalities. Although many students considered Heemstra, quote, too stern, Smith recalled that, quote, he knew how to create goodwill. Smith, for her part, quote, directed the choir with only her fingers right in front of her, and she expected every eye to be looking right there. If you goofed, her brown eyes snapped at you, and you knew you had better pay attention or be out of her chorus.
That's some good stuff. Now, you've worked on this for a while, and I'm sure that there were some parts of the book that were easier for you to write about and some parts of the book that were much harder to write about. Could you tell us kind of what sections you found most difficult to get into or to understand?
Well, one of the things that I was trying to do, which I'm not sure the first history by Gerald DeYoung did so much of, was context, providing context. And therefore that made it the most difficult to write the 21st century chapters, because we're so close, it's hard to get perspective on what is more important or less important in relation to what needs to be talked about.
So to provide context, then you would read a lot of secondary sources, because Greta and I saw many books in your office. How many sources do you think that you consulted overall, outside of the primary, the secondary sources?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's too many to count.
Between articles and books, I don't know, 10 to 20 at least. But, well, a way maybe to find that would be, I do have endnotes for the chapter. Yeah. So you can, besides the primary stories.
Just a few.
And I did try to sneak some things in there, which otherwise got cut. So you could count up.
Right. This is a little different than Charlie Dyke, who we talked about last month, with not having any footnotes or anything like this. This is a very well-researched book, and you can double-check his work by double-checking the endnotes, so challenge to you out there. Doug, what do you think would be your most enjoyable part in working on this book?
Chapter 3, which I read from the junior college, in some ways because I knew about it least, but also, ironically, there are more kinds of sources that enabled me to talk more about Heemstra and Smith, for example. One particular point in chapter 3, Heisingfeld, George, am I remembering? Yes, George Heisingfeld, diaries of a student from 1934 to 1936, talking about the movies he watched, how much candy he had each day, what was in the chapel, and how many times the bus from Hull broke down, the landlord who read his diaries and didn't like what he had to say about him. All that kind of stuff, which now it's on what? TikTok, and how do I or any other historian get hold of such information? But more was there to work with.
Yeah, that's great. We do love primary documents, so don't think that what you have in your own collections isn't worthwhile. George probably didn't know, well, he kind of did. But we wanted to read everybody's diaries, so please donate them to the archives so we can be in the know-know, okay? Next up, we're going to talk to Kim Vanessa a little bit about what it was to copy edit. She was the copy editor, content and copy editor, and I don't really know what the heck that is. So why don't you explain what your job was?
So I responded to drafts of every sentence that's in this book. Multiple drafts. All of Doug's work, all of Duane's chapters, all the different people, I think 7 different people who wrote sidebars, the captions that Greta wrote for her photographs, the words written on the book jacket. So that was my job. Along with that was kind of enforcing deadlines. Often the authors and I would go back and forth a couple times on one chapter or one sidebar, fine-tuning the language. And I think that's great fun. And all the authors I worked with were open to my thoughts and carefully considered them. As you can guess, I spent the most time with Doug. And we worked together for 1.5 years. When he had a first draft of a chapter ready, I would first just give big picture impressions, not like sentence level editing on that at that early stage. And I would usually categorize my comments into affirmations and things to consider. Often among the things to consider were recommendations to cut words, to cut sentences. We're still friends, by the way. And sometimes to cut whole paragraphs. Doug, as you've maybe figured out, is a man of detail, of context, of full explanations. I would remind him that the audience for this book was not solely academicians, and that Northwestern always needed to stay in the forefront. In other words, not to go too much into national or world context of events that were going on at Northwestern. Taking suggestions and making cuts to one's writing is hard because we as writers tend to fall in love with our own language. But Doug was incredibly gracious. Whereas he didn't always take my advice, he gave fair consideration to all my comments, and we got the book down to less than 400 pages, which was my goal.
That is a laborious task. Doug, and this is for Doug and Kim. Doug, how many words did you first have, and how many words did Kim excise from the book?
I don't know. I didn't count the words. Maybe.
Maybe 20% was cut. And that's really hard. But I do think that we were left with the gold. We were left with what needed to be in this book. So.
Right. Those are all hard choices. Again, it gets back to that comprehensive kind of history. The good news is that all of Doug's research and initial drafts and everything like that are saved for posterity. It doesn't go into the trash can. It goes into how many boxes? Doug, did you?
So far, two.
Two good archival boxes, so that for in the future, that reference material is available to scholars. So that's really great. Kim, one more quick question. What was the highlight for you in working with on this book?
I think the highlight was working with a team that was so respectful of each other and so affirming and so unselfish. Everybody just used their strengths and did what needed to be done. And it was just an honor to get to help produce a book for an institution that I've worked for over 20 years and really care about deeply, even with its warts and imperfections, which are noted in the book. It's an honest telling.
Great, thank you. Now we're going to get to Duane. Duane is now the Director of Marketing and Communications at Northwestern College. But at one point, I understand your role was overseeing sports information. How long did you do that role?
I would guess I would guess it was probably about 6 to 8 years, something like that.
Okay.
The Bill Booty years, for those of you
Sure.
that remember Bill,
Sure.
As well as Rick Clark after him.
Yeah. So Doug concentrated on the academics part of the institution, and Duane wrote the chapters behind each of Doug's chapters dealing with the sports history. So given all that rich history, you know, it's no secret that Northwestern College does love its sports. How did you determine, again, to cull down and choose what stories? How did you choose the stories that made the book?
First of all, as most of you probably know, Northwestern has had great national success in sports like football, volleyball, men's and women's basketball. Obviously, we wanted to include highlights of those, but I wanted to make sure that every sport was included in some way. So I one of my goals was that an athlete could look at the book and they could find their sport was covered and feel good about it, even if, you know, maybe that specific year they were on the team maybe wasn't mentioned. But so I spent a lot of time looking through the Beacon, Classics, other sources. The athletics website was a really good source, looking for some highlights of some of those sports. So things like the first time the women's tennis team qualified for the national tournament in 1994. The only Raider to pitch a perfect game in softball, that was in 2000. The first esports All-American in 2021. So wanted to just give them as much coverage as possible as well.
Great. My understanding is you're going to read one of your submissions for the book. Duane did a lot of writing for the book. Not only did he write about the sports, the book has all these different sidebars about people and about topics, and he's choosing one of his favorite ones. Is that correct?
Well, it was actually chosen for me.
It was chosen for him. We're saying it's his favorite.
It is one of my favorites. So this is a sidebar on Deb Rimmerty-Lusink. It's entitled Sharpshooter. She was a Northwestern student, as I'm sure many of you remember, from 2004 to 2008. And she also was an assistant coach from 2011 to 2016. With 600 Raider fans cheering her on from 6 to 8 a.m. in the Boltman Center on February 13, 2006, Deb Rimmerty-Lusink demonstrated to the rest of the nation what basketball fans in Iowa and the Great Plains Athletic Conference already knew. She's nearly a sure thing at the free throw line. Before a live audience on CBS The Early Show, Deb made 256 consecutive free throws and a total of 582 out of 588 attempts. How many of you were at that event? I'm sure some of you were. Yeah, that was a highlight of my time here, certainly. The broadcast came on the heels of her 133 straight free throws made during the 2005-06 season, breaking all known organized basketball records. Deb's skills abounded throughout the court. She scored a school record 3,854 points during her 4 years at Northwestern, averaging 28.8 points a game and setting 11 NAIA Division II records. The four-time first-team NAIA All-American was named the National Player of the Year in 2006 and 2008, and she led the Raiders to the national championship as a senior. Her work ethic was legendary, from practicing up to 12 hours a day in a machine shed court on her parents' farm near Rock Valley, as a teenager to shooting free throws in the dark at Northwestern to improve her accuracy. Here's a quote from her Red Raider coach, Earl Woudstra: "Without exception, she's the best shooter I've ever witnessed at any level." That's a reflection on the amount of time she spent on shooting. She went from being really good at shooting the basketball to being a really good team leader and friend. She realized her identity is not all about just being a basketball player. Deb, who was also a two-time NAIA Scholar athlete, played professionally in Europe for a year and served as an assistant coach for her alma mater from 2011 to 2016.
It's a fun story. I love that you asked, where were you? I feel it's kind of like the where were you when the space shuttle crashed or something? Like, where were you when Deb Rebney was on CBS Morning Show? And my mother called me up. I was living in Goldsboro, North Carolina. And she said, "Sarah, this phenomenal basketball player is on TV," and I had to watch it. So even I, who was not living in Orange City, made sure that I watched that amazing clip on TV. It was fabulous. Thank you. So we're going to move on to Miss Jill. Jill Harsma was the managing editor of this book, and she also, along with Kim, made sure that there were no falling parts, or everything was falling into place. That's a nicer way of saying it. But she was also a sidebar writer for the book, and I think this is what makes the book fabulous. I had some people tell me when they were picking them up from the library, I'm not a reader, and I don't think that will prevent you from reading this book, because there's so much in it that you can just pick up and enjoy reading, whether it be one of the sidebars, whether it be the sports section, whether it be one of Doug's chapters, which are really readable. And that's what makes this kind of a fun history. And Kim said that they were very concerned about the reader. How would the reader respond to the book? And I think you as readers will respond to the book. And so the sidebars are one of, tell us a little bit about the sidebars. I'll let you do that.
Early on, when our first team got together, Doug, Greta, myself, Rebecca was with us. One of the things that Doug was very clear about is he wanted this to be a collaborative and collegial process, and to have more than just his voice involved. And so one of the ways we achieved that was by bringing in various writers in our community to write sidebars. And some of those sidebars are about people who had impact at Northwestern, and about other fun things. I wrote sidebars on Karen and Jeff Barker and Beth DeLeo, my predecessor. I wrote a sidebar on the Board of Trustees, and a few others along the way.
And how long do you think? It's the sidebars are like a page or 2 pages, but how long would you say it took just to write those?
Well, my sidebar on the Board of Trustees, I probably didn't have to, but one of how I researched that was to read minutes from the beginning. And that was a lot of nights downstairs in the archive room at the library, trying to decipher cursive handwriting for the early years. I was really excited when they moved to typed minutes. And taking notes about what I thought was interesting, especially my perspective working with the board for the last 20 years. I probably spent 14 to 16 hours doing the research, and that wasn't the writing. I have probably 10 to 12 pages of typed notes. My first draft was 1,500 words, and I had to get it down to 500.
It did kill us all.
And so I cut, and then I said, Doug, how did you do this? How did you write this book? Please read my sidebar and tell me what I don't need. And so Doug and Kim gave me great feedback, and I finally got it down to 500 words.
That's great. I think we'll pass the mic now to Greta Grahn. Greta is the director of the library. She and Doug have collaborated on another book project. You might all be familiar with the illustrated, what's the title of that?
Just Orange City.
Oh, just Orange City.
Very creative.
History. I thought I had illustrated history of the Orange City book. Oh, just Orange City. So now she was super involved in this book, and she wore a lot of hats. She's my boss, but I'm not getting paid to say this. This woman can do it all. She is. It's true. In comparison to me, then maybe in comparison to, I don't know, a superhero, she might not compare to. But she wore a lot of different hats. So would you like to tell me some of the different ways that you were involved in this?
Well, sure, but I just want to say I obviously didn't do it all because my husband's a little miffed that I did not get his Northwestern tennis playing career in the book. I left that out.
Sorry, Steve, not comprehensive. No.
So what was your question again?
What were all your roles in this book?
I got to do a lot of fun things. I helped put together all the appendices at the end. So those are like tables and, lists of all the presidents and board of trustee presidents, all the enrollment, a list of all the head coaches. So that was a lot of fun research to do. And then I pulled together the photos for the book to help illustrate the different chapters and write the captions for those, which I also really enjoyed.
Yeah, well, first of all, we did have some students.
We did.
And
yeah,
we should acknowledge.
Will Minnick is here, and he actually scanned in and transcribed those George Hoisingfeld diaries. So he went through this, I think there's 4 volumes of it, and Will scanned them in and then, typed up what he wrote so it's a little easier to read. And that's time-intensive work. Yeah. So thank you, Will.
And we do enjoy at Northwestern College to bring students into the fold and teach them how to do archival or library skills. So it's always fun to have those people in particular really help us. Yeah. But now the photographs. We have been watching the slideshow before this started. Greta put that all together. And if any of you have been in our archives, you know that there's boxes and boxes and boxes and boxes. I can't even tell you how many boxes. And slides and of photos. So how, Greta, did you decide what pictures to use?
Yeah, it's hard. I want to say we probably have tens of thousands. I don't know, close to 100. I don't even know how many photos we have. And they're all different formats, right? They're in print, and then they move to slides. We have a lot of negatives, and then they kind of move digital. And so they're in all these different formats, which makes it challenging too. But I just kept reading Doug's text and trying to find stories to illustrate. And then I really did look for photos that I thought showed something. I wanted to see people's faces, see their emotion on their faces, find something that really maybe told about the time. I tried to look at their dress and their styles so people could see that this is a picture from, this decade or this period. It was a lot of fun to look through all those photos.
And then how did you choose where to put them? Like, what was that process like?
Well, Kim told me I had a little limit. She said I could do one about every 6, or was it 8 pages?
6. It was supposed to be 6.
I think I snuck in a few more, because there's some I just could not let go. I just really wanted them in there. Yeah.
But that's another way the book becomes very engaging, is because the the pictures correspond with the text, and it gives you that visual context for the book. So it is a lot of fun to look at that. And now we have tons more digitized because of
We have
this
a lot
project.
more digitized, and we're working on getting them even more organized.
Don't ask for them right now.
Yeah.
So Greta also worked on some of the sidebars, and she is going to give you a little example of one of the sidebars from the book.
Yeah, one I got to write was about special guests at Northwestern, and so it's called Special Guests Rolling Out the Red Carpet. Despite being off the beaten path, 40 miles from the nearest Starbucks, Northwestern has welcomed several celebrities over the years. Track and field star Jesse Owens visited Orange City in 1937. He was arguably one of the most famous men in America after winning 4 gold medals at the 1936 Berlin Olympics. He led a team of black basketball players who traveled around the country for exhibition games. His squad played the Northwestern Junior College team, winning 54-43. Owens signed autographs for his fans, and one of his autographs is in the college archives. It's actually currently on display. If you want to see it, it's on the 2nd floor of the building. The Beacon describes the crowd's delight when Owens stepped onto the floor. More and more, the applause swelled and the cheers grew. At last, the crowd could gaze upon its hero. While Owens was already well known, musicians Paul Simon and Art Garfunkel came to Northwestern just before they became household names. In fact, the duo's name was consistently misspelled in Northwestern's publications, appearing in both the newspaper and yearbook with the E and L in Garfunkel switched around. After they played for students at the May Day banquet in 1965, the two wandered around Kohlenbrander Hall and stopped by room 119 to chat. Paul strummed the resident's guitar. Most students did not appreciate their performance, finding it too socially progressive. Simon and Garfunkel were likely accustomed to this tepid reception. Their album from the previous year sold almost no copies. While Simon and Garfunkel offered to return their pay, the student activities and group insisted they be compensated. In the fall of 1965, just months after their gig in Orange City, a producer added more instrumentation to the song, The Sound of Silence. The re-released song climbed to #1 on the Billboard chart, launching Simon and Garfunkel into becoming one of the most famous groups of the 1960s and 70s.
I'm curious, did anyone here see Simon and Garfunkel in Orange City? Adele did. Did you like them?
Do you now like them or not?
That's great. I'm going to just ask the panel a couple of questions, and then we're going to let you come up with some questions to stump them, or I don't know. So first, Doug, I'm going to ask you, how many times did you rewrite or revise a chapter? Do you know? Mm-mm.
At least twice, generally speaking.
Okay. And Kim, how many times did you read each chapter, sidebar, sports? How many times did you read it?
At least 8.
Wow.
And that included, when we were setting up the design with our designer, Roy Trevino. So we had to go over it a couple times then.
That's a lot. And Duane, how many times did you read your sections or rewrite your sections?
I think looking at all the pieces and everything, I probably read each of them, well, at my sections probably 5 or 6 times.
Yeah, that's
Quite a bit.
That's what me too. I'm not as quick of a writer as other people, so it took me a long time to write my sections. Jill, how about you? How many times did you read the book?
2 to 3 times.
And Greta?
I'm guessing like 9 or 10, maybe, just because I would read the chapters again and again when I was trying to find photos, going through the proofing and copy editing. Doug would often send drafts when he'd finish something, so I think, I didn't read it 9 to 10 times straight, but I think overall probably I read each chapter that many times.
And so don't point out if there's any mistakes in the book.
Actually, that's not true. We've already started. We know there are mistakes. We've started a list, so do let us know.
It's so hard to be perfect. That's just human nature. I think we all know that. Now I just want to ask you, what is your favorite part of the book? If you had to choose one chapter or section, we'll start with Greta and then go back this way.
Oh, chapter 3 is my favorite. I love those early years. I love the stories of particularly Fern Smith and Theora England. I love reading about that time period.
I would agree. Chapter 3 is my favorite.
My favorite sidebar was on Elwood Fall. He was a teacher in the academy and junior college from 1929 to 43. And he's just a good example of so many people who are like the unsung heroes of Northwestern. There's not going to be a building named after them, but he did so many different things. If you read the sidebar, it's just almost mind-numbing, all the responsibilities he had. And it's just a good example of so many people that have helped the college thrive because of their hard work.
This may sound like a strange favorite, but the pages discussing HIV/AIDS and the play When Scott Comes Home in Chapter 6, which was part of the Boltman years, I found that part really interesting and moving. So some of you may not know that there were students who attended Northwestern and shortly after died of HIV/AIDS. I know that Doug worked really hard to address those things honestly and sensitively, and to include various perspectives and voices. So I really appreciated the writing of that section.
I think I've already said I particularly appreciated Chapter 3, so the junior college, but I really enjoyed trying to work on the context ones too, so the prologue and the interludes.
I haven't read the book yet because
he's the president and has no time? Is that?
Well, that and because I am the president, I did not want to have any undue influence on the process. Being in the current role I am, and so I only read. I mean, Jill would sometimes say things, or would you read this, and I would read it, but otherwise I didn't read it. So I'm looking forward to reading it, but we were a little busy last weekend.
Thank you all for coming and being a part of our nights at the museum. We'd love to showcase people and events, and especially Northwestern College, as it's such a big part of our community. But now, do you have any questions that you would like to ask any one of these panelists while they're trapped?
Doug, was there ever a thing that you read that you say, what, that's not what we thought it was? That it was something different than what maybe the Northwestern lore was going through the years, or it's different than what you thought it was?
I'm thinking. I guess one of the things that was unclear to me that became a little clearer, and I don't know if it will be clearer to readers, was the whole process of Northwestern shaping its identity as it reached out beyond its initial Orange City, it's Dutch, and it's the Reformed people in this district, and in figuring out how to reach out beyond that with a mission and a sense of identity that could be communicated, and what that means in relation to RCA as a particular denomination, that whole ball of wax, seeing that develop and figuring that out a bit more. But
I wanted to share something that surprised me. To me, it was really interesting to read about how the college leadership had to wrestle with the Reformed Church in America to expand into a junior college and then into a four-year college. The RCA as a whole was so afraid about adding another RCA college to the other two, which was Hope College in Holland and Central College in Pella, because they were afraid that if we added a third college, it would hurt the enrollment of the other colleges, and they didn't want to support a third college financially. But the leadership in this area and the constituents of Northwestern were so confident that this was the right thing to do that they pushed and pushed and finally persuaded the powers that be to allow those developments. And that, to me, is a really surprising and interesting part of the book.
Anyone else?
At what date have you stopped?
Through the calendar year of 2024, I think maybe a little of 2025 got in there. But,
we have a couple of things in the appendix about 2025, but yeah.
So,
and in sports, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So close, but yeah, already it's becoming outdated.
Through your research, how would you describe the ethos of Northwestern or the DNA of Northwestern? I know we have God's light, all these, but how would you describe it after studying or exploring our history?
Trying to describe the ethos of Northwestern College, kind of beyond pursuing light. I think it has to do with trying to take a broadly reformed view of God is sovereign, making God's self known through Jesus Christ, and that things hold together in Him. And that's the way the education should be approached, exploring the realm of things in light of all things hold together in Christ. So there's kind of a unity to searching, pursuing the light.
Well, looks like we're about ready to wrap up. I want you to know that if you haven't purchased your book, you can do so out there or at the bookstore. They're $25. The proceeds of the book go to another part that's near and dear to me, which is Northwestern College Archives. All the proceeds go to the archives. And preserving our history is something that we do here, and we share that responsibility with Northwestern College Archives. We have a very good relationship between the two of us because we don't want to duplicate or compete with each other. And so I hope that you go out. Don't tell my children, but I brought a check, so they each will be getting their copy for Christmas. I think it will be a great Christmas present. So Will is actually getting one from me too. He already knows that. But I also want to invite you, when you think about the things that you have in your closets, in your recollections, our history is about ordinary people as well. It's not just top-down people. So we treasure things like George Husinveld's diaries, or we've gotten letters from World War II veterans. They're beautiful from this community. What other things should I mention?
Oral history, like a First Smith.
Yeah, scrapbooks. All these things that maybe you think aren't valuable do have historical value to us in this community, and it is a way that we can preserve the past. It's a way that you can get into the next history book. Because then we have your material to deal with. But I want you to think about that. Think about what ways that you can support us, not just through your financial donations, but also through these artifacts that mean something to this community. And lastly, this book has spurred a lot of individual memories. For instance, when Duane read his, it just brought me back to North Carolina. When I read mine, telephone one. Aletha immediately came to me and had a story to tell me about the telephone scandal. I ask you, that is also part of our history that we do not necessarily know. All those interesting behind the story kind of information that isn't in a board of trustees or isn't in the Beacon. So if you ever feel like just typing up a little memory when you're reading this book, send it to Greta, myself, or Doug, or Jill, or any of us, so that we can just keep that in our archives for future reference. With that, I would like to thank you for coming and give a big round of applause to all of our panelists. Yes. If you would like your book signed, both Doug and Duane will be up front. They have pens, so please come up and get your book signed. Thank you.
All right, students, let's see how you did on your quiz. Number one, which Northwestern president gave a chapel talk accusing students of mediocrity? Who was it? It was James Boltman. In fact, chapter 6, which is about the Boltman years, is titled, "We Need to Transcend the Tyranny of Mediocrity." Number two, inscribed on Academy Hall, now known as Wiener Hall, are the Latin words Deus es lux. What do these words mean? Oh, we know that answer well. God is light. Academy Hall went up in 1894. We're not sure who decided or who came up with that line for the building, but we think it might have been Philip Solon, who was a Latin instructor there and later became the principal and used it on a seal. Number three, what famous basketball team played against Northwestern's Red Hawks 4 times in the 30s and 40s? It was the Harlem Globetrotters. But they weren't the only famous athletes to come and play Northwestern. Jesse Owens and his basketball team came not long after Jesse won gold medals for track and field in the 1936 Olympics in Berlin. So Jesse Owens was not a one-sport athlete. Number 4, what future U.S. president received an honorary doctorate from Northwestern? George H.W. Bush, he did. That giving of the honorary doctorate was a little bit controversial because at the time he was vice president and he was running for the Republican nomination with the caucus in Iowa being just 2 months away. 5, what former Northwestern president spoke to men in Heemster Hall about his experience in Vietnam? I'm hearing a couple answers, but the correct one is Bruce Murphy, President Bruce Murphy. And the context of that was related to a controversial art exhibit that Ryan Vanderhill might remember. There was an exhibit involving a black flag. And that exhibit, that particular piece, was really offensive to some veterans in this area. And President Murphy did decide to take down that piece, which caused some controversy among some of the students who felt like he was censoring art. So he got a late invitation. I think he spoke around 11 p.m. midnight in Heemster Hall about his experience in Vietnam. And after that, those men in Heemster Hall better understood both Murphy and his decision. If anyone can tell me about what year?
Just 2007.
2007, according to Dr. Anderson. 6, September Bears, a play written by theater professor Jeff Barker, was set in the aftermath of what national tragedy? Yes, 9/11. And it was based on a real project by an RCA church in the New York City area that collected teddy bears to comfort people after 9/11. 7, what Northwestern English professor returned to teach 2 weeks after delivering her baby? She was my department chair, Barb Turnwall. So I believe that was 1970. Is that right? There was no family leave. And so she just made arrangements for colleagues to cover her courses, and boom, back in the classroom 2 weeks later. 8, what author was the featured speaker in Northwestern's first day of learning and community? It was Kathleen Norris. And the theme of that first learning and community was that of place. Several people here were on that committee. 9, name one of 3/4 Northwestern coaches in the NAIA Hall of Fame. Pardon? I'm sorry? Bob Corver. No. Yes, Earl Wildstra, Bob Corver, Earl Wildstra. Hint, a wrestling coach. Paul Bartlett. And now Chris Corver has been inducted. Number 10, who was the first female president of the Board of Trustees? Quite recently, Tricia Vermeer, 2022 to 2024. But the first female board member was in 1970, and that was Gertrude Cry. And now for the bonus question. When women's athletics started in 1970, what was the women's basketball team called? The Raiderettes, of course, of course. Good job, folks.